Mary,
Yes, Jen.
to start off, nice and easy, what motivated you? Like, why write a book about sex research? Where did this come from?
This book, this is one of those books. Normally, my books come from random bits and pieces that I've found here and there, and I think, what else could I shove in there and then put a cover over it? But this one came about. It was one of those wonderful moments where you read a single sentence somewhere, and you're like, "That's it." I was reading. It was an issue of. Well, not really reading, flipping through somewhere, an issue of Film Quarterly. Why? I don't know. But there was a reference in this article to the colposcopic films of Masters and Johnson. I remember thinking, colposcopic, that's like colposcopy, that's cervical. Sounds kind of like films made inside a woman's body. And I thought, wow, sex research. That's going to be my next book. It was just this moment where I thought, that bringing people into the lab to sort of document and study sexual physiology, and it was a delightfully awkward thing, and also a very courageous thing, especially at the time that Masters and Johnson had done it. So that was it.
Well,
Yeah.
I have to admit, I won't say where I went to graduate school when I say I have seen a few sperm under microscopes before, but there is that relationship between new technology discovery. So you got the microscope, discovery of the cell, telescopes, discovery about the universe.
Right.
Talk to me about the penis camera.
Well, the penis camera was sort of the nickname for what Masters and Johnson used. They referred to it. Masters and Johnson had a way of adding a lot of syllables, sort of dressing things up in scientific jargon, which they really needed to do, because at the time that they were working, it was a pretty conservative time, the 50s and early 60s, and they were, pornography would be stimulative literature, and the couples that they brought into the lab to have sex were the reacting units. And somebody who lost their boner had a failure of erective performance. Anyway, the penis camera, it wasn't called the penis camera, it was the artificial coition machine. And it was a clear acrylic phallus on a motor housing. You can find them now on eBay. I mean, not Masters and Johnson's in particular, but it's a sex camera, a sex machine, and it's basically, a motor to, kind of go like that. And it was clear, so you could see through, in a light source. And I'm not really, because I could not find, apparently it's been dismantled.
Aww. I
was told by Roy Levin, who would probably know. He's a researcher in the UK. Anyway, it should be in the Smithsonian, I feel.
Yes.
But apparently it doesn't exist anymore, so I wasn't able to see it. And to me, it would be kind of amazing to have a camera. The miniaturization that would involve at that time, it's kind of hard to imagine that existed. So it may have been like
small cameras were
sort
at
of
the time.
shining a light and then filming. And I haven't actually seen the films. Whoa, I'm losing my. There we go. So that's the artificial coition machine.
Well, and that was one thing that I think when I was reading the book, it seemed like those initial discoveries sort of helped do something that is another common theme in science. I hadn't really thought that sex research would have the same parallels, but that some of their discoveries helped overturn common hypotheses or sort of misconceptions about sex. What did they learn from their studies with the artificial coition machine that helped sort of overturn some existing theories?
Well, not so much with the artificial coition machine. I mean, that was sort of, there were things like, what's the source of lubrication? Where does that come from? But one of I think, were you thinking of the upsuck theory? There was a theory.
Yeah.
Yeah,
this was,
the Masters and Johnson, this is my favorite Masters and Johnson study. They debunked this theory of, it's insuck. Some people called it insuck. Some people called it upsuck. Upsuck is more fun to say, I feel. But the idea was that when a woman had an orgasm, the contractions would just would serve to suck up the semen and deliver it more quickly and facilitate conception. And for centuries, there was this belief that that you needed to have an orgasm to become pregnant. So it was a great time to be a woman.
Yes.
Because doctors were counseling men. There was this great case. Somebody cited the Empress Maria Theresa of the Habsburg monarchy was having trouble conceiving, and the physician advised her husband. I think that I may botch this, but he said, "I'm of the opinion that the vulva of Her Most Royal Majesty should be titillated for some time prior to penetration." And it seemed to work because I think she had like 8 kids eventually. But Masters and Johnson didn't buy the upsuck theory, and they came up with a really inventive way to test it. And what they did is they
I'm afraid.
had a cervical cap, and in the cervical cap was some semen simulant, artificial semen. And there are several recipes for this out in the literature. Some of them use flour, some use cornstarch. I don't remember
unhygienic.
I don't remember which one Masters and Johnson used. But anyway, then they put some radiopaque dye so that, and they had the woman sitting in front of an X-ray machine. So at the moment of orgasm, they took X-rays to see if they could document any upsuck, and they did not. Okay. So that was how they went about.
How do you get someone to have an orgasm when they have cornstarch and radioactive dye attached? I'm just curious. I mean, does that take a special person to get really relaxed and in that
yeah, especially
place?
Given that this was, I don't know, it was early 60s or 50s. That was a time when, it was, I don't know how I would love to have spoken to some of those men and women who volunteered for these studies, but they're all anonymous. So
$20 have radioactive dye put up in your.
That's kind of what it. That's kind of what it comes down to at universities now. It's you're an undergrad, you need money. There's a sign on the back of the stall door saying got 10 minutes, earn $25, and then you can go in and whatever the study requires. So anyway, but upsuck and in upsuck, while they weren't able to show that it happens in people, the Danes have done a fair amount of work with pigs.
This is one of my favorite parts of the book. Please describe it. It's another reason I'm like, Denmark. National health care, excellent education, sensible rulers, and people who like to stick their hand, and they like to give sows orgasms. So will you share with the audience what the Danes are willing to do to produce pork production in Denmark?
Sure I will. What they do, and I went all the way to Denmark to observe this. There's something called the 5-point sow stimulation plan, and the reason the reason it exists is that the Danish National Committee for Pork Production determined, and I don't know really how this came about and how they figured this out, but a sexually stimulated, aroused sow, who's then artificially inseminated, will have a 6% higher farrowing rate, which is more piglets. It was a significant enough difference that they came up with this poster with the various steps. And the steps are there's not a lot of overlap between foreplay in pigs and foreplay in people.
Okay, don't take notes.
Yeah. The one thing that was interesting, though, that the pig is one of the only animals that does manipulate the breasts, the mammaries.
How does a male pig manipulate? I'm trying to now imagine some cloven hooves.
Yeah.
How exactly does this happen?
They're from the side, kind of. Anyway, but there's a lot of kind of putting your hands under the hocks, kind of hoisting up and punching there, and then There's a little, because there's a video too, people. There's a video.
There's a video?
There's a video for the farmers, and I love this video because there's a handsome blonde Dane in a lab coat.
Of course.
And he's very, just sort of matter-of-factly, it's just my job, going about doing the 5 steps.
The 5-point SAL stimulation. Wait, I'm gonna have to
program.
Okay.
But at one point they kind of zero in on his hand with the wedding band, and I felt like they just wanted you to feel reassured that that he's married. He's a normal,
man.
Healthy Dane with normal interests in human females.
Yes. Okay.
That this is just his job.
Yeah. He's not getting any kicks out of this.
No, he's not. He's not. No. So I saw this in action, and it was an interesting afternoon.
You saw it in action.
I did. It was
the movie. You were actually present.
I was
for
present.
The 5-point plan.
Yeah, there were 2 inseminators, Martin and Morton. And I kept calling Martin Morton and Morton Martin, and the woman who was hosting me, I'd say Martin, and she'd go, no, this is Morton. And I never got it straight. But anyway, they were very nice and kind of curious as to why I'd flown all the way to rural Denmark to watch them do their job. But
actually,
anyway.
So the woman that you were mentioning, one of the things I loved about your book was sort of all the passionate researchers, the human stories, because I think that, again, that's another thing that people forget, that science, you might read the results, but they're actually people doing science, and it's really like a human endeavor full of these great stories. And Anne-Marie, who was in Denmark, you did a great job of describing her and how interested, all of her good questions, and how she didn't mind smelling like boar pheromones. But one of the more intriguing characters was also Marie Bonaparte,
citizen scientist.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. I was like, oh, she was one of the first citizen scientists.
Yeah.
She was, which is such a popular thing now, but she was Napoleon's grandniece and had done some studies with over 40 women on the distance between the clitoris and the vagina. So can you tell us a little bit more about her citizen science efforts and where they led?
Marie Bonaparte, she was an interesting woman in that she got interested in this. She herself had difficulty achieving orgasm through intercourse. It turns out her guy was gay, which I don't know. Oh. Who knows? That's a sideline. But she had this notion that that one of the factors that might play into this is the distance between the border of the vagina and the clitoris. And so she took a lot of measurements on all these women, and then interviewed them. How easy is it for you to achieve orgasm through intercourse? And she came up with this. She did find that women who had a closely located clitoris had an easier time of it than the téléclitoridienne, which is French for she of the distant clitoris.
Wow.
I just love to say téléclitoridienne.
I know. Now you're making me wish I'd taken French. My mom made me take Spanish.
Yeah.
I have to work on that.
So she did in fact find a correlation, and she was convinced enough to actually have her own clitoris surgically, or just the tip of it, because it extends underground. So she had the tip of it surgically moved closer, thinking this would help her. I know you kind of just wanted to say, try another position, or, tongues work too, So twice, she had that surgery done twice, I know. But an interesting woman, and with a passion for scientific inquiry and having an orgasm.
She's like, talk about motivated question.
Yeah.
She was like, her inquiry was highly motivated.
Right.
But I mean, you had so many great people sort of featured throughout the book. What were some of your other favorites? Those are ones that stuck out in my mind. Maybe I'm like and I couldn't help as I was listening to the audiobook driving along, and I'm like, wow, I really wish I had a ruler in my car. I'm gonna ask all my friends. We're gonna crowdsource this one. But what were some of your other?
I actually there's a guy at Emory, Kim Wallen, who did a follow-up on this. He with a larger set of subjects. He was gathering data, and I'm like, I'll measure it myself. And so I did that, and I remember my husband came home, and he's like, because the tape measure was on the bedside table, and he's like, what were you measuring?
Don't worry, honey. No, well, that's okay. Actually, since you mentioned your husband, who must be one of the most mellow, flexible, open-minded people. So I'm sorry. Well, maybe he doesn't like to be in the audience at things like this. So one of the things that I was shocked to read is that he agreed to participate in one of the studies you heard about. So yes, tell us about this trip that you took, because it sounds quite romantic.
Well, yeah, it was so romantic. It was just the definition of unromantic. But it was, I wanted to, Masters and Johnson brought couples into the lab. Around the time I was working on this book, you didn't find a lot of researchers bringing couples in. They tended to be, if you're studying arousal or orgasm, you just had one person and their finger or a vibrator, and they'd go off and do their thing. They'd be in the fMRI or whatever. There weren't a lot of couples. There is now somebody who be on later tonight.
Yes,
Nikki,
we found out
right?
later tonight.
Yes,
Stay in your seat.
Yes. So, but at the time I was writing the book, there really weren't a lot, and I was curious about what's that like to be a couple in a laboratory scenario having intercourse, like how delightfully awkward that is. And there weren't a lot of people to interview, and I had trouble finding anyone doing that sort of study. I did find one, it wasn't a sex researcher, it was somebody who was documenting, was testing an imaging process, an ultrasound, 3-dimensional, well, actually 4-dimensional, because it's a movie. It was an 3D movie.
Plus time.
Yeah, plus time.
Okay, got it.
So, and he had done, it's kind of like you can print out a 3D model of say a rectum. And I say this because somebody did give me a 3D printed rectum.
Wow.
At a talk not long ago, and it's like really beautiful. It's red plastic, and I don't know whose rectum it is, but anyway.
Wait, it's red?
It's red plastic, yeah. I use it as a pencil cup.
Wow, that might... I feel bad for whatever happened to that rectum.
I don't know. I wish I knew whose rectum it was. I'd like
to
meet him and show him that his rectum now resides in our TV room. And
I don't know if I want to go to your house, because I've also heard you have like a walrus penis, but we'll get to that later.
Oh, just the bone.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so 3D, an ultrasound 3-dimensional movie. It would, he was trying to see if this was something that could be feasible. If somebody's having like painful intercourse, could you kind of see what's going on and document it, and would it even work? And he had done a similar study. This is the study I heard about, had to do with an erecting penis. I don't know if this was for a Peyronie's disease diagnostic or why he was doing it. It was published in a legitimate journal. Anyway, so he had used his own penis for that. And at the end of the piece, it said that he mentioned this plan that he wanted to actually bring a couple in and see if there was feasible to image that. And I wrote to him right away, like, I'd like to be there for this historic undertaking. And he wrote back and said, well, that would be fine, but we've had difficulty finding volunteers.
Oh my.
So if your organization would like to provide volunteers, we can arrange it. So my organization called its husband.
Oh my.
And I wasn't, in this case, I wasn't particularly forthcoming about it. It sort of went like this. So you know how you said you haven't been to London in 25 years?
Oh, wow.
Let's go, and we're going to stay at a nice hotel, and I'll charge it to the book, and we're going to go to see a play in the West End, or maybe we'll go to Stonehenge. We have to have sex in front of a guy in a lab coat. And my husband is just an incredibly supportive, nice guy, and also, it was just sort of an abstract, oh yeah, whatever, sure, let's go. And then it wasn't until we're sitting in this is a hospital in London.
I feel like we could be sitting there right now.
Yeah, like in a little hospital, nervous. Johnny, the little horrible.
Oh no, with the back, the ties in the back.
Yeah, so we're waiting.
Not making you feel very sexy.
No, and I had a pair of socks that had a rip in them, because it was kind of cold in there. But he had tried. Dr. Dung was his name, and he had tried very hard to make it romantic, I mean,
yikes.
It's just an imaging room in the X-ray department, the radiology department, and he had a little single bed. He kind of like turned the covers back, but still, it was. And Ed was kind of joking, like, where's the Where's the soft lighting and the romantic music? And he was kidding, but Dr. Dung was like, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, wait, on my laptop, I have the soundtrack to Les Mis. So,
Wow.
yeah, so it was, not very romantic.
Okay. Well, I'm still like your commitment to your work and Ed's commitment as well is
Yeah, well,
laudable.
for me, it was, I knew how fun this, as a writer, how fun this would be to write. Ed didn't have that to look forward to.
Yeah.
So I'm taking notes as this is going on.
Right.
I'm actually taking notes. I don't think a man enjoys a woman taking notes during sex.
Or getting out the tape measure.
Or getting out a tape
Yeah.
measure, yes. These things are off-putting.
No.
So, yeah.
You could consider it like the women who had to have the radioactive cornstarch. It's like
Yeah.
free trip to London,
Yeah.
free trip to London. Oh.
Yeah, that's what you cling to. Yeah.
Yes. Well, no, but okay. So I mean, but I did think I was actually kind of hoping that I get to meet your husband because I'm not sure that's definitely a very supportive individual.
Yes, it was very nice. And when he is in the audience, I usually have him at this point stand and take a bow, and everybody applauds.
Wow. Yes, I was.
Yeah.
But that does kind of get at the question of sort of the validity of these kinds of studies, because especially when they're couples, you can imagine that it's not what one would call a naturalistic setting to be being watched or in a lab. I mean, has that come into question when these studies have been done?
In this case, in the case, he was just looking at, is it feasible? Is the depth of focus right? Does this work? I think, you bring people into a laboratory. I mean, if you're studying arousal or orgasm, I mean, the arousal is arousal and orgasms. I mean, it may be more intense in certain, because the mind it plays an important part, but it depends. You're looking to document something in the brain usually with an orgasm study. So I think however you get there, you get there. So if you were studying, say, love, I mean, how do you even define love, and is what happens in a laboratory setting? I mean, then I think you might have a little, be a little squishy.
Yeah, I guess when you're just trying to make a movie of not your own penis, then you're just willing to do whatever. But when we were talking, I think the study of orgasm, I know that has been something that was in the book and is something everybody wants to know about. And you, after the book, had a very popular TED Talk where Mary was telling me that she wasn't allowed to reveal that she was an author because it might have led to some sort of monetary gain from being part of TED, which of course
God forbid.
Yeah, can you imagine?
God
anyone
forbid an
would
author
ever
should make some money.
Oh no, I know, and anyone going to TED, I'm sure, is only doing it for the well-being of humanity and not any kind of financial gain. But you did say that after that, no one knew she was an author, and then they thought that she was an orgasm researcher because her talk had been about orgasms. Do you want to share? I asked her what kinds of mail she got after that. And she said she would bring some of her mail that she got as a purported orgasm researcher.
This when in the 2 weeks after the TED video went up online, I got some very interesting mail. Let's see. I've just 3. They're short. Okay. I won't read the man's name. Just saw your TED presentation. I would like to share with you something that I have told very few. I'm a 49-year-old male with 2 children living in Greece. That is not it. From a very early age, I'm able to produce an orgasm when riding my bike. And instead of going directly to my destination, I ride in circles to delay my arrival. Whether it is the bike seat or the anxiety produced by the delay, it causes me to have an orgasm, which is accompanied by ejaculate. I hope this is useful in your research.
I hope he brings extra pants for work.
I know. I was thinking that's part of the anxiety. I'm going to show up at my destination with a wet spot.
Yeah, that would...
Anyway, okay. Okay, dear Ms. Roach, I just viewed your presentation, blah, blah, blah. Very interesting. I have a singularly physical response, which is the actual clearing of my sinuses when my husband ejaculates into me. My own orgasm has no effect on the sinus clearing.
Huh.
There you go. The only time I've ever heard reference to this effect was in Woody Allen's movie What's Up, Tiger Lily, and it was the male character who thanked the female for clearing his sinuses after intercourse.
Oh, maybe, so next time you go to your ENT, if you're having some kind
Yes.
of like sinus problem, maybe you need to, maybe this is an area of research. I hope we have some active researchers in the audience
it
tonight.
sounds, useful.
These are the first observations that could be the basis of an incredible future discovery on sinus clearing.
Okay.
You never know.
Hello. My husband and I watched your talk, blah, 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 online at TED, and several times we exchanged looks of, wow, it's not just me / you. I love that you can look a slash. Let's see, you discussed a woman who thought she was possessed when brushing her teeth.
Oh.
Yeah, there was a woman, it was kind of a sad story. She would brush her teeth and it would trigger an orgasm, and she thought, I think she lived in, she's somewhere in Asia. She thought she was possessed by demons, and she switched from brushing her teeth to mouthwash for her oral hygiene regimen. I would not have done that.
No.
I'd be like brushing 3 times a day. She says, so sad indeed. I, on the other hand, brush my teeth several times a day. I don't reach orgasm every single time, but I can. And I always enjoy brushing more than anyone I've ever met. She hasn't met that lady.
Yeah.
For me, it seems to be a combination of the sensation, motion, and the sound. I also enjoy the occasional knee-gasm. Although the spot is actually just above my knee. On a really good day, putting on lip balm does it for me. Yeah.
Wow.
I know. I guess I've always thought I was just wired weird. Yeah, and I think, yes, they're wired weird. People are wired differently.
Well, that was one thing. Thank you for sharing those letters. I'm glad, and hopefully that will inspire the future scientists here. But that was one thing, both when I was pondering the distance between the clitoris and the vagina, or how many women had orgasms brushing their teeth, and wondering why not me. It did get at one aspect, of I think anything around sex, which is sort of variability. I mean, and that seems like it would make another thing that would be very hard to study scientifically, because there's so much human variation. It
does seem to be. I mean, the other letters that I got more of were not as entertaining. They were women saying, I don't think I've ever had one. Would I even know? I'm like, yeah, I think you would know. I mean, I'm not a sex researcher, so I tended to just, try to refer them to someone, because I'm not in a position to be giving advice. But a lot of women would write and say, I haven't been able to achieve orgasm, and why is that, and what can I do? And then on the other end of the spectrum is the woman that I spent some time with, Kim Ayers, who can think herself to orgasm. And we went out for sushi one night, and I said, can you do it right here? And she goes, well, I'd like to finish my meal. But then we sat out on Grand Avenue on a bench, and you could see that she was not faking that, and she could. It took her a while to kind of develop that. No, to develop that ability. It wasn't something.
You're sort of playing Les Mis. You're like, I've got Les Mis on my phone. Listen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I said, I said, do you just do this all the time? And she said, no, usually I get home from work and I'm too tired
to just sit around.
She said the last time she had done it was on the tram at Disneyland.
Huh.
Yeah.
I would have thought that like little Neptune's submarine would be a better, but anyway.
Yeah, I don't know what it was about the tram.
She could have, like, that actually, you should send her a book idea. All the places around Disneyland.
Yeah.
It could be good for like a seated.
The Disney people will love that.
Oh, yeah. I don't think there'd be any litigation involved.
No, not at all.
No, but I do think, to that point, I'm sure at the end of the day, like a lot of people, not just because of the TED Talk, are interested in orgasm. And I thought one of the things that made me a little bit sad were the stories like of, Marie, where or I think it had been the upsuck. There was a lot of time where the research had been, oh, you definitely need to pleasure your wife, and here are all the ways that you can make your wife achieve orgasm. Do you actually think, whether it's for a woman or a man, do you think that all this research has actually positively impacted people's sex lives, or what's sort of been the outcome of a lot of the research that you've studied?
Yes, I think absolutely. I mean, if you look at like the first researcher to really kind of like study the physiology, the anatomy of sex, sexual intercourse, arousal, this guy, Robert Latu Dickinson, who is the one who got Kinsey actually interested in studying sex. Kinsey had been studying wasps, gall wasps.
But not sex in wasps?
Not sex in wasps, no. But Robert Latu Dickinson was a gynecologist around the turn of the last century, and he he got interested in sexual issues because he would hear stories from patients who would come in, like women having difficulty conceiving, and then he'd bring the man in and he'd sort of say, okay, well, tell me what you're doing. And the man was like, just thought you only went as far as the labia. Like wasn't, just nobody talked about sex. One of the things that sex research has done is to get people talking. And, I mean, Masters and Johnson and Kinsey, were the best known examples, but Dickinson was was one of the first to just say, we are sexual beings, and if we can't talk about this, then there's just so many unhappy marriages that because they don't know what they're doing, and they're afraid to talk about it with each other. And sometimes they would talk about it with him. And anyway, so to me, he was tremendously heroic, as was Kinsey and as were Masters and Johnson, partly, and everyone who does it today as well, but particularly, in a conservative era, to be doing it, to be getting funding for it, to be putting books out. I mean, Masters and Johnson had to hire a second secretary for all the hate mail they got.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of hate? I mean,
like this is not science. This is pornography. This book, Human Sexual Response. This is pornographic. What are you doing? I mean, it was the 50s.
Even with all the multisyllabic words, that didn't.
Even then, even then, they had difficulty publishing in journals. They would. I mean, they were. It was tremendously, in my opinion, brave what they did.
But it sounds like in the end, really just the being more open about talking about sex, like the parts, the pieces, what's necessary has probably had more of an impact. Just opening up the dialogue has probably had more positive impact than some of the other technological or pharmaceutical solutions.
Yeah, I mean, pharmaceutical. I mean, Viagra is a it's a boon to those who need it, want it. I mean, it's. And I think that there'd been, anytime you understand how a system works. I mean, there were textbooks of human physiology in the 60s that if you looked in the index, there was nothing under intercourse or clitoris or, I mean, it was like sex didn't exist as a physiological function. I mean, it was just. Yeah, I mean, and that's like to not study it, understand it. That's just insane. I mean, it's it's an important part of life. It's part of the body. It's part of,
That's where life comes from, Mary. That's why. Well, no, and that's why, we're really glad that Mary joined us tonight, because who better to talk about the science of sex than someone who's been 4D imaged in the lab?
That little clip. It's somewhere online, and it's hilarious because it's the most G-rated, X-rated footage. First of all, it's like 3 seconds. It didn't come out in 4D, and it's very grainy. It's ultrasound.
Yeah.
That's hilarious, though. It's out there somewhere.
Well, that must have been slightly disappointing. I know we only have another minute or two, but I mean, I am just personally interested to know, and I'll bet a lot of people in the audience, how did writing this book, change things for you, Mary? How did it change, the Mary before and Mary after? Aside from getting those interesting emails, did it actually change your practices?
No, I think when I was reading Human Sexual Response by the Masters and Johnson, it's like 300 and something pages, and it's just documenting the entire arousal to orgasm process, and so when you're immersed in a book like that, which is so detailed, you find yourself kind of an observer in your own bedroom, you know, like which is just, for me, it was just distracting. You know, I'd be like, oh, is this the part where the earlobes engorge? It was a temporary affliction, but, it sort of takes you out of the moment. So it was kind of an interesting.
That's what I won't get the quote exactly right, but there's a great Feynman quote that is like, one of his friends who was an artist told him, I would never want to be a scientist because I would never want the blossoming of a rose to be ruined, right? I just want it to seem like this magical process.
Right. Yeah.
And I have to admit, when the staff here asked me if I would like to interview, I'm like, I don't know if I actually really want to know about sex.
Yeah.
I like to think about cells. I like to think of the mystery of life.
But
I don't know.
Knowledge is power.
Oh, no, that's what I found. Yeah. That's why I tape measure. So anyway, we appreciate what a good friend you are to us. And Mary is going to be out signing her book.
Yes.
Which has like all this information and more.
And actually more.
Yes, and even more, many, many, many chapters more. But thank you again for being here tonight and being such a friend to the Exploratorium and for your inquiry into the frontiers of sexual research.
Oh, yeah.
So everyone, please give it up for Mary.
Thank you, Jen.